Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just another tinfoil hat. Welcome to my show. Today, we are going to be discussing the case of the Goffstown Goofball. Yes, it's a silly name for a decidedly strange case. A masseuse by the name of Lindia Morell had just completed her shift at the Swedish sauna in Manchester, New Hampshire at around 2:45 in the morning on November 2nd, 1973. She stopped to get gas and also some coffee with a friend, and it was about an hour later when she was finally heading home for the evening. As she crossed the Merrimack River, Lindia noticed what she described as a bright yellow light in the sky that flashed red, green, and blue. She couldn't tell whether it was moving or stationary, though she did notice the planet Mars sitting to the left of the object, which is an important detail as it rules out Mars as being the object that she saw. As she continued driving, she kept track of the strange light, and at first she thought that it just appeared to be a little bit brighter. She stopped at an intersection, lit a cigarette, looked at it, and immediately it went out. Now, it soon reappeared at the same spot as she continued driving. The object went out again as she approached a hospital and nursing home, and then came back on as she crossed over a railroad crossing. The light went out again, flickered on for a short period, then remained out as Lindia moved through the small town of Goffstown. When it finally reappeared, as she turned left at an intersection, which, remember this fact, it's very important, it had a popcorn stand, the light came on again, only this time it appeared much closer than it had before, and was right in front of Lindia's position. Now, instead of just some nondescript light, Lindia described a surprisingly detailed object. She said that it appeared to be a strangely translucent globe covered in a honeycomb-like design of orange and gold. She also said that the multicolored flashes were actually due to some sort of beam which emanated from the center of the object, and then the upper left portion there was a pale oval window. This scene was accompanied by a high-pitched noise that Lindia claimed produced a tingling sensation in her body. This wasn't the only bizarre physical reaction that she experienced. She said that her eyes felt like they were being pulled towards the UFO, like it was drawing her to it. However, far more practically terrifying than that was the realization that she could not move her hands from the steering wheel. They were frozen in place. There was a tentative claim by the witness that she experienced a loss of memory for about half a mile between a church and cemetery. Now, in the vogue of the era, she said that she believed that this may have been when they recorded her memory. However, there's also the concept that she was just so focused on what she was seeing that she didn't notice where she was. Likewise, she noted that her car seemed out of control and moving at a very high rate of speed. However, even Lindia noted that perhaps this was just due to her unconsciously putting the pedal to the metal, though she did think it was likelier that the UFO was drawing her to it. Take that as you will. As Lindia approached a point parallel to the center of the cemetery, the UFO became increasingly closer and appeared to her at least to be the height of a 3-story building, growing brighter and louder as both driver and craft drew closer together. Now she saw inside the quote-unquote window and said that standing inside the object was a strange being. Lindia claimed that the being was observed standing at what looked to her to be a control panel, again very much in vogue with the concept of alien invaders of the era, its lower torso and legs obscured by a dark surface. The entity itself was a color she described as between dark gray and peachy flesh tone, darker on the body and lighter on the face. The head was round and the face wrinkled, a thin, lipless mouth curved down into a little frown. A pair of large egg-shaped eyes with dark pupils appeared to zoom in on Lindia's attention, and she received a quote-unquote telepathic communication of the very biblical, "Don't be afraid." So at this proclamation, Lindia, let's just say, did not take that advice and in fact did the exact opposite. Absolutely terrified, she noticed a house coming up on her left. It ended up being the home of one Mr. and Mrs. Baudois, as well as their large German shepherd. As she raced to come up to the house, Lindia claimed that she actually shielded her eyes from the magnificent and increasing light of the strange honeycombed object. As a result, she careened through the driveway and halfway onto the front lawn. Leaving the car on, Lindia dashed out of the car and past the German shepherd that had come up upon her growling. Lindia, usually nervous around dogs that she didn't know, claims that she simply smacked the poor thing in the face and continued up to the house, pounding on the door and ringing the bell, yelling "Help me" over and over again. She glanced up at the sky and noticed that the object had shifted position. Still, she believed in an effort to keep an eye on her. And she also noted that at this point the strange whistling noise had become simply unbearable. Finally, a reluctantly roused and very sleepy Mr. Bedouin came to the door, and Lindia proceeded to collapse on the verge of faint. When she saw the man, she actually fell into his arms, saying, "Help me, I'm not drunk, I'm not on drugs, a UFO just tried to pick me up." Now, Mrs. Boudoir joined them at this point and noticed that Lindia was covering up her ears. However, neither of the couple heard anything. Apparently, the tingling and noise that Lindia was experiencing stopped about 2 minutes after entering the kitchen, although she did have a case of terrible retina fatigue for some time afterwards, as though she had been staring at a bright light. Now, both the police officer which was called that night for Lindia, as well as later investigators, claimed that she appeared genuinely frightened by her sighting. And I'll state here that there actually were a bunch of other sightings of strange things in the sky in the area around that time. There's one from March of 74 that is interesting for a couple of reasons. The first being that the woman described a very similar 3-story tall orange object that emitted a whirring noise. The second is because the little article is actually entitled, "No Believer, Local Woman Sights UFO," and begins by saying, "A Hanover Street woman still refuses to believe in the existence of UFOs, even after sighting one from her kitchen window early this morning." That's dedication. Now, this case is rife with odd physiological and psychological implications of high strangeness. You have the apparent memory lapse, the bizarre, almost hypnotic transfixing of the witness to the event they're witnessing. And you have to notice too that the witness did frame this in the ufological vogue of that time. I mean, given the fact too that this happened mere miles away from the infamous interrupted journey of Betty and Barney Hill, it's really no surprise. And it does bear striking resemblance to another abduction classic, the Pascagoula abduction, also occurring in 1973. Aside from the reported hypnotic effect on the witness, again we have this description of this bizarre, wrinkly gray entity. Now, it's also intriguing in this case because Lindia claimed retina fatigue after her encounter. Whatever she saw, it seemed as though it was so bright that it caused this lasting retina fatigue. Now, of course, could this have been from some honeycombed globe-like object emitting bright lights? Yeah, of course it could be. However, to me at least, I think that this seems to be a dead giveaway that the inherent truth behind anomalous encounters always seems to deal with some sort of light or light radiation, which is kind of maybe the predominant factor of the encounter, and everything else is just some sort of phantasmic, surreal sort of cover for it. Another absolutely fascinating aspect of this case are the fact that it seems as though every escalation was marked by a rather significant landmark. Lindia first noticed the light as she was crossing a bridge running water. It would vanish and reappear at intersections, railroad crossings, and finally, most interestingly in my book, the sighting severely escalated right by a cemetery. The connection between cemeteries and sightings of all sorts and paranormality, I mean, heck, ghosts are pretty much cliche, but also cryptids like Bigfoot and even UFO sightings, there is a precedent for that. And here, parallel to the very center of the cemetery, Lindia not only experienced a loss of physical control, but she noticed the being inside the craft, the craft itself appeared largest when she was close to a cemetery. However, and maybe this is just simple coincidence, one of the strangest things about this encounter to me is that this encounter heightens at a cemetery, and the sighting itself occurred pretty much right in the witching hour, early in the dark morning of All Souls Day. So if you enjoyed this episode on the Goffstown Goofball, please like, and if you're new to this field of crop circles, go ahead and subscribe to see what weirdness the future may have in store. Till then, you can keep up with whatever else I'm doing on my free blog at patreon.com/justanothertinfoilhat. For today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.